Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Harley Quinn Season 4, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, I was curious whether or not they were going to make a whole point of it, and they did. I figured as much because of how, flabbergasted and taken back. Specifically, Barbara and Dick were about the whole Harley bashing in Professor Pig's head, and it's like, right, we don't kill it. She's like, how was I supposed to know that's the rule? And literally everything around is screaming, don't kill. Well, she even loved the thing of in this Bat Cave, we protect black lives and don't kill and all this other stuff. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So it's like, I love that thing of you kind of don't notice something until someone points it out, and then you kind of notice it everywhere. And then the fish goes off, and she's like, you should have led with that because it's a little bit of a, you kind of should have put in a song form, and I definitely would have remembered more. But yeah. So because of that, she gets stuck with Alfred the entire episode, which kind of gave off that Karate Kid type of thing, wax on, wax off. It didn't really go down that route. Not necessarily wax on, wax off. It has that flavor, but not the context of everything you've been doing has been training for this. It's not really. It's just that Harley's approach isn't how the rest of the Bat Squad likes to approach things. So she's stuck with him, and he's preparing stuff and doing the stuff that he would as a butler. But let's not forget, he is pretty skilled. Not only, he's Batman's ally and confidant because he is very skilled. I mean, granted, they don't really dive into it, but I feel like most continuities lean into the fact that he's got a military background. That's what Pennyworth was kind of based around. So I think that's true to his character all across the board, maybe, even in the comics and such. But either way, putting all that aside, like I said, I love Harley's frustration with okay, so why can't I just go out there? Because my whole thing is I want to save the day, I want to help people, I want to do the heroic thing, and now I have to miss out on all that for the BS of all this other stuff. And I think it's interesting when you throw in a wrench in the story like Atalia, which Alfred was not excited to see her, which it turns out the woman at the end of the episode ended up being Talia, like I thought so. It's because she's kind of set up in a situation that if Wayne Enterprises ever falls, that she's kind of set up to be the one to kind of take over. So that's why she's here. And she's cutting around the fat of what's happening at Wayne Enterprises. I guess the way Dick was I've got things under control. I'm is he technically running? I was well, God, I thought the whole point was supposed to be that Bruce is supposed to have been running things even behind prison. But I think it's also, I mean, to be fair, because the Bat family and everything has kind of had a negative effect on Wayne Enterprises. I think they're real on how they've kind of gone about things. I think I could be mistaken. Yeah, I believe so. That's kind of what the last episode was kind of talking about. So maybe that's more what Dick was talking about. I'm running things. We're kind of doing things fine because we're handling things fine without Batman around. But she's also here to see her son because she hasn't seen him in a very long time. To the point she's where's my little boy? And Damien's I'm here, mother. And she's when did you grow up past Pampers and stuff like that? She's how old are you? You growing up so fast. It's because he's 12. It's wow. I mean, because typically the story is he's at least 10 or something. He's usually he is a little older. It's not like he's been with Bruce since birth. So that's interesting. I wonder in this continuity. Well, I mean, to be fair, could only the way Talia makes it sound, maybe it's just she never really paid attention, which is kind of actually really sad. It's did you never really pay attention to your son even when he was around? Even when he was in your life? Because I said, it's usually around this age is when she drops him off with Bruce. I mean, I'd assume that's how the circumstances go of how he ends up in her lap. I mean, how he ends up in Bruce's lap. But I'm I don't know if Bruce has had him since he was a baby or something. She just hasn't seen him in that long, or maybe he was a little kid. Let's say maybe he was 6 or something, and now it's been 6 years since he saw. I don't know. That was just kind of very and they didn't have very mother-child moments. She would just kind of later on be oh yeah, how good is which one of these pacifiers is good for a 12-year-old baby or something like that? And the cashier was wait, what? So maybe, I mean, she's going to be sticking around because of the Wayne Enterprise stuff, so I think we're going to get more between Damien and his mom, which is going to be interesting. I didn't even think about, right, you do have kind of your pseudo-family with Dick and Barbara, looking after you, but it's yeah, your dad's in jail, so, I mean, but they do see each other from time to time because, I mean, he went to go see him last episode, so it's not Bruce is completely out of your life, it seems like your mom kind of was, so that kid was already kind of messed up, and the kid's typically a dick and a douchebag. Typically, that's why most people don't like Damien. But, for him to, at least from what we've seen in the show so far, like, because he's been in the show since the first season, like, he's not as douchey as I think he probably is in the comics. He's bratty, sure. I'm sure, like, that brattiness, it gets escalated even more to becoming an asshole, but he hasn't really reached that point. He's still kind of the bratty kid. But either way, I like how those stories kind of converge, because while Ivy's kind of reined in the Legion of Doom, they're kind of on her side with like, hey, we're going to do this very like conscious villainy thing of we're going to do good, but then what's the twist to it? I love that, like, she's obviously like pulling up all these trees, all these male trees, and planting female trees, and it's like, okay, I never really knew that about trees. Is that really the case? Like, I doubt that's, I'm curious, like, do like male trees not like give off oxygen? Are they the ones that kind of release stuff that people are allergic to? Or is that just like for the sake of the show they kind of made that point? I'm actually legitimately curious. Well, looking it up a little bit, just like one sentence thing I read that actually plays into the episode, male trees obviously release male plants that release the pollen, but females produce plants that produce fruit, which we see Harley eat one later on and thank Ivy for, like, oh yeah. So I was like, oh, interesting. I never correlated. I never really thought about there being a differences and stuff like that. But like I said, that was like a very surface level, like, it coincides with the episode. The episode kind of really leans into that, but I didn't really think about it too much. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Either way. And I love that the Joker's kind of upset because he doesn't get to be in the know about it. It's like, for one, you're the mayor, so Ivy likes to play her plans very close to the vest because he's not part of the Legion of Doom. Something I also didn't notice, and I felt so stupid about, at like the thing where they're keeping people at bay, instead of police officers there's Joker's goons, because later on, jumping ahead a little bit, when Alfred gets arrested, it's not cops that took him away, it was Joker's goons. I was like, what's up with that? I was like, it goes back to my point last episode. I was like, I couldn't remember. It's not just that Gordon got fired. He defunded the police, so his goons are the new, like, officers. I was like, I completely did. Yeah, so it seems like that adds validity to my memory of, like, yeah, he defunded the police, so his goons are now, like, the new police squad. You'd assume, like, Cheryl has to be one of, like, Joker's goons, right? There's no, because, like, typically when the world's falling apart, when, like, the villains had split up Gotham into new Gotham, that Cheryl and then became Bane's henchman type of situation almost immediately, like obviously like animated cartoonish fast, but so I would assume Cheryl's at least one of them, you'd assume. But circling back, because he's not part of the Legion of Doom, I'm assuming Joker isn't in the know about it. That's also why Harley doesn't want to share it with him. Also, she doesn't like Joker. It's like, right, you're my, like, I tolerate you. It sucks that you're the mayor, but you will always be like my girlfriend's ex, that douchebag that I've never liked. So, and also, like, knowing the way you treated Harley, it just kind of makes that cut even deeper, I'm sure, of her animosity towards him. But he's kind of upset because of that. He's so petty, so that when she's trying to get, like, permits to do stuff, he won't let it through, because it's like, oh, you won't let me in on the twist of your plan. Which it turns out her twist is, hey, we're going to pull up all these male trees and replace them with female trees. Now, that cuts into Wayne Enterprises' bottom pocket, because they produce, like, on a pharmaceutical level, they produce some allergy medicine, and it's going to tank their pharmaceutical side of things, which is, like, not as villainous as people would kind of think. In fact, a lot of people would probably like you doing that a lot, because for one, it's like, okay, it's environmentally friendly. Two, you're helping people get rid of their allergies, so that's good. And three, you're also fucking with what is essentially Big Pharma, which a lot of people can get behind. Like, a lot of people have the mentality of fuck Big Pharma, so so it's kind of like, that's Ivy's, like, obviously, like, the only really villainous things you really see is when she, like, kills people, is when that really comes through. That's kind of the only times you really get to see that villainy really shine through. Otherwise, you're kind of like, oh. Because, it goes in line with who she is, because Poison Ivy is, she's always been this way, always been essentially the eco-terrorist who cares more about the plants than people. So, obviously, that's been a term that at least I didn't really know until I got older, but it's like, yeah, that's who she is. So, it's very continuously been that character of, like, yeah, she plays that anti-hero role, at least when it comes to plants, because she does good for them and kind of who cares about humans. But she cares about people, too. It just depends on the person. I also appreciate Harley getting her own Bat Fam outfit, but it's one that she bought from like a sex store or something like that. It's like, wait, you can't just buy a suit without kind of letting us, like, until like you're officially part of the team, let alone getting it from a sex shop or whatever. Because I was about to say, it's like, yo, it looks like the cheeks are kind of hanging out a little bit in that. But it's like, okay, it makes sense if it's a sex shop thing. I do like that Talia and Ivy really hit it off because she kind of has no equal when it comes to her job. It's like she's got Nora, which I love that they are kind of hinting that Nora I mean, it makes sense that she kind of has like I guess it'd be weird to say almost like a code fetish because it's like, well, when you're married to Victor Freeze, it makes sense. But then it's like on her dating app, there was one person she was looking at, another person that caught her attention was Icicle, and who does she kind of like get close to at the end of the episode? Captain Colt. It's like, oh, I'm starting to see a pattern here, which is so sad because Bane really likes her and he wanted to impress her because she was brushing off the pasta maker work to him, which he's like, oh, my old adversary is back. Obviously, if you don't remember, that was a whole bit with Bane, specifically when it came to Harley and Ivy about the whole pasta maker thing. And he's like, oh, what episode was that when he was like, we're finally clear and good because you saved my life? I don't think it was the DeVillies. I think it was like a later episode. I don't remember off the top of my head now. I think he was still bringing it up at the Villies, so it was definitely past the Villies. Anyway, that was never resolved this episode. Maybe that's still going to be a continuous thing for Bane. It's like he can't escape this pasta maker BS. Which is so sad because he was doing all that to impress Nora and she kind of has no interest in him. So he's like, oh, I've been on the phone for like 45 minutes. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to Italy and handle this myself. Hey, I want tickets to Italy. Oh, can you stay on hold? He's like, fine. It's like he's so ready to destroy and blow stuff up, but he's also weirdly considerate in other cases and patient in other points. I mean, that's supposed to be like the beautiful juxtaposition that is that character. But either way, like I said, because she had to go to this kind of woman's thing that powerful women around the city are kind of part of this group, and lo and behold, that's where we were first introduced to Talia in the episode. She shows up, which apparently she's been avoiding this thing for like the past 10 years. She doesn't really care for it too much because she doesn't like a lot of the issues that Ivy has with it. Talia shares too, which is like, oh, they're kind of two peas in a pod and stuff. And she's the one that convinced Ivy to kind of manipulate Joker. It's like, right, he's always going to be a cockroach, but at least he'll be a cockroach that you control, and it works out to her benefit. I love that she had to be like, well, the twist is going down Wednesday. He's like, I get it, middle of the work week. He's like, oh, that's so devilish. I can't wait for Wednesday because she needed something signed by Wednesday, and he kind of jumped on it immediately. Like, it gives him this thrill of like, oh yeah, I get to be back in the villainy type of thing. That's why he likes to be kept in the loop, because it's like, right, I got my duty as a stepfather, a father who stepped up, and also and a husband and mayor, so that kind of pulls away from any, can't really be the villain that he used to be, so has to put all the energy towards all this other more positive stuff. So kind of getting his sick kicks a little bit, living vicariously through the villain, specifically Ivy. So, but I do love that her plan comes in contrast with Talia, because Talia is taking over Wayne Enterprises. So when Ivy's plan goes through, it completely tanks Wayne Enterprises, which, like, Ivy stands her ground and is like, no, I'm not going to apologize for that. Which Talia's like, honestly, it's pretty dope. It's like having someone that's capable, another woman in this business who's capable. So it's like, yeah, what was it? What was the tote bag saying? Like, oh, the future of evil is female or something like that. I want to say, I might be butchering that. It was kind of something like along those lines. So it definitely feels like we are going to get probably quite a bit of Talia being like a recurring character this season, which is pretty dope. Because other than like taking over Wayne Enterprises, because like I brought up the guy that's the butler in jail last episode, I was like, maybe he has some connection to Talia. Maybe they're the ones really running. Because I was like, I wasn't sure if Bruce was really running things in for Wayne Enterprises even in jail, but maybe he was. I don't know. The fact is, for Talia to show up like this, that's why I'm not really sure if it's like, oh yeah, this is all part of the plan. She's presenting herself like, oh, I'm here for one thing. Maybe it's Damien related. The sad thing is, it's probably most likely not going to be Damien related, and that's going to cut things even deeper. But maybe there'll be a wholesome, because this show can be dark and funny, but it could also be very sweet and wholesome at times. So I could definitely see this maybe by the end of this season, or maybe there's going to be one solid episode around Damien and his mom kind of finding their way through like everything. Post all of this, I'm curious to see what, like, going forward, like what Ivy and, because it's like a mutual respect thing they have for each other. So what that looks like going forward is definitely going to be interesting to see what that kind of like friendship thing is. Because like obviously Ivy looks up to Talia, like what she kind of represents. It's like, oh, she's a bad bitch, where it's, and I'm sure like Talia's kind of feeling the same thing of like, oh yeah, here's Ivy, here's someone that goes after what she wants. Yes, I'm angry, but she's like, anger is like any emotion. It just only lasts for a little while, and you just got, you got to respect the game. I got to respect the plan you executed, and I just ended up being on the losing side of it. So what that dynamic looks like going forward is going to be interesting. I really thought it was sweet the time Harley and Alfred were spending together, and the point being that him teaching her bitch, which is the title of the episode, it's an acronym, breathe, and basically you have to take time and weigh your option type of situation. So because, he's worried about, right, because Talia's cutting fat from a lot of the expenditures at Wayne Enterprises, because a good chunk of that, because that Batwoman was the first time I'd ever really thought about that. I mean, it makes sense, but I never really thought about the fact is that Bruce funded his operations. I mean, yes, you're a billionaire, but a lot of that money is wrapped up in a large enterprise. So it's like, because I guess in my head I thought like, well, I never really gave it too much thought. I always assumed like, hey, you cut yourself off, you're paid as like your connection to Wayne Enterprises, and you just take that paycheck and you put it towards Batman. But it's like, no, there's a specific like, I guess, fund and section of like Wayne Enterprises money that's used specifically for like Batwoman's the first show I've ever really known to really, I mean, maybe some of the movies tackle that, like some of the Nolan movies and stuff, or maybe even the older ones, but I never really thought about that until Batwoman brought it up. Like that was something where they're like, that ends up being a story point of finding out like, oh yeah, there's all this secret money that is from Wayne Enterprises that's going somewhere we don't know what. It seems like an embezzling situation. So, but that's where like this episode ties in, where like Talia's like, oh yeah, I'm going to clean the fat up of like what money is being used for this stupid vigilante stuff, and thought like, hey, Alfred thought, hey, I'm going to be out of a job. That's why I thought what he was doing later on, I thought he was doing, like, at first, Harley's like, oh my god, like, he's trying to rob this place, because she let two robbers get away, and I was like, wait, you're letting those robbers get away, you're gonna think Alfred's robbing the place, but he's not. No, he sure as hell is. I was like, wait, what? I was like, well, and then he kind of talks about, like, oh, I'm gonna be out of a job soon. Is that really what this is? I was like, this could be all a ploy. It's meant to be, like, a teaching lesson for Harley. It's like, no, he legitimately tried to do that. I was like, that's so interesting. And they're so happy that Harley did what she did, and she's like, oh, what? All I had to do was snitch on the one person that really trusted me this entire episode. You should have told me sooner. And because of that, she's got her own bat suit, which we don't get to see her try on this episode, but I'm curious. I mean, it's very befitting, because it's like they kind of foreshadowed this, because she had on, like, what was it, episode 8 of last season, when she was inside of Bruce's head, and it was stylized after, like, Batman the Animated Series, and she was wearing the classic Robin suit. I'd assume that's classic Dick Grayson. I wonder that's the very classic, like, short / underwear and the little, like, almost elf shoes. I'm like, isn't Dick the only one that's ever worn that outfit? Has any other Robin had that classic outfit? I guess it just depends on when those other Robins popped up. Because, like, what Damien's wearing right now is typically, like, Damien never wore anything like that. Like I said, that's classic Robin. Because a more modernized Robin would be like his clothes in like the Teen Titans cartoon and Teen Titans Go. That'd be his more modernized version of that. Very similar to what Damien's wearing now. Either way, I was also thinking that might have been Jason. I was thinking like the one that's in like the red suit, and then like the black and yellow keeping the black and yellow cape, but having like the main colors be. I can't remember which Batman that was from. Was like that from? It wasn't from the Batman, was it? Or was that from the animated series with Robin wearing the red? That might have been. I don't remember. I'd assume that was Dick Grayson, but maybe that was one of the others. Maybe that was like a Jason Todd or a Tim Drake Robin. Because it might have been Tim Drake who wears like the red. Once again, I'm throwing all these tangents aside. My point was just like, right, for her to have her own bat suit and what that looks like is definitely going to be interesting. And I love she had to make a point of like, yeah, I'll show it off to Ivy, but in a more professional sense and not like a personal sexual sense. It's like, you know, it's going to be used in that regard. But Alfred walked away after getting arrested so happy, which Harley kind of felt bad. It's like, oh, I betrayed Alfred, but also felt bad for him. But he was smiling. I thought he was like, oh, I did this for your sake, Harley. I'm willing to go to jail. But it's not until he was locked up and on his way and he's folding the thing. I'm like, you did this to get close to Bruce again? And he's like, yeah, we can be reunited. And Zaz is calling him out, being like, dude, if you keep doing that, I'm going to basically have to kill you. But he doesn't end up at Blackgate where Bruce is. That's only where like the rich and rich go. Everyone else has to work their way through the, you know, psychiatric system that is Arkham Asylum. So that's going to be interesting to see how that place messes up Alfred, or will it be a situation of like a villain will break out and then he'll break out with him? I'm curious to see what his adventures in Arkham are going to be like. It'd be kind of sweet if Harley, especially after this episode, goes to visit him to see how he's doing and check in on him from time to time. I think that'd be really nice and sweet. So another fun episode. I'm really curious to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. One more episode left to watch after this, so excited to see where it takes us. Also, little tidbit. I don't know if I'm going to remember this tomorrow because I'm recording this. It's Friday. I'm just going to put these all up Saturday. But I'm curious. I don't know if I'm going to leave this in the comments or not. But it's going back to Nora, just a little bit of a thing. I went back to the episode. I was wondering like, oh, why is Nora at the Legion of Doom? She only pops up there to pick up her like widow's check, essentially, because I guess like there's a policy kind of like, so she probably gets checks every once in a while. Like if you're in the Legion of Doom and you die, like your significant other probably gets like benefits maybe for the rest of her life type of thing. So she comes to pick up like benefits as a widower. As a widow. I was like, oh, interesting. So it's not like she was a part of the league. She just happened to be there and then, you know, ended up becoming Ivy's assistant. So that's just the last bit I wanted to add. Like I said, I don't know if I'm going to remember to correct myself in the comments of the first review when that comes out tomorrow. But either way, really that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good